Hello, everybody. Welcome to Illuminations with Tiina and Fi. I'm Fi. Hello.
And I'm Tiina. Hi there.
Hi, Tiina. And in this series, we're going to look at the more challenging emotional states of stress, worry, and anxiety. And in this episode, we're going to focus on a more global understanding around anxiety and stress and worry, and explore what that might mean for both Tiina and I. And in the second episode, we're going to focus in on anxiety and how you can manage the emotional state of anxiety. We'll also have, of course, our guest speaker, who will be someone being in the arena and talking about how they have managed and lived with anxiety. And we'll obviously have our nuggets at the end, which are our great tips for how you can then take yourself forward around living with worry, stress and anxiety, or whether you choose not to. So Tiina, let's get us kicked off. Any thoughts you've been having around anxiety, stress? I know you've been reading a bit about Brené, and you're the one that reminded me a bit about her, and I thought that was very interesting. So anything you want to share with us at this time?
Well, it would be interesting to start around a framework of what is anxiety, what is stress, and what is worry, what sets them apart from each other. Might be a good way to start. And of course, as always, these will be our opinions of what it is, and as very often, our perspectives are different, just between you and me. So then, of course, there will be many perspectives in the world, and for those who listen to this as well. Anxiety. I'd like to start with anxiety and kind of see what I mean with anxiety and how it kind of is set apart from stress and worry. Stress and worry, I think we can feel or be in an emotional state where we kind of in our day-to-day life still functioning, have a feeling in our bodies, that kind of worry feeling, those kind of butterflies in your stomach, slight nervousness, with stress, pulse is quite high, but then when we kind of tip over into anxiety, and especially high anxiety, because what I've just described with worry and stress, that could be like slight anxiety. But when we kind of tip over to proper anxiety, that's where a person probably doesn't function anymore. The logical brain has shut down. And for me personally, it becomes almost like panic station. And there's no reasoning around, is this real? Do I have a reason to be in this state? Do I have all the information I need in order to actually panic? Is this a situation of life and death? So it's the kind of shutdown of that logical mind. You've kind of gone beyond at that point. And it would be interesting to see what you resonate with and where you want to kind of go, well, for me, it means a little bit different things.
Well, it's interesting actually you talk about that, because I was just reading an article which is from the latest latest neuroscience research gone on at University of Pittsburgh. And they found that actually not only does the physiologically go into fight or flight, which we'll talk about, but actually it actually deactivates some of the brain activity. It is active in doing that. So that's really interesting, that it shuts down the prefrontal cortex, a lot of activity there, which is where you make your logical decision making. And so that's why decision making when you are in a state of anxiety is actually really difficult, because it isn't going to be logical, because it can't be. It is happening inside. You can't stop that. So that's really interesting. You use that language, yeah. For me, I think it's very similar. I think there's something around, we know that there's a very healthy level of stress that keeps us motivated and keeps us going, and we know that. I think, when it tips over, that the anxiety that you're not able to live a life of comfort and life becomes uncomfortable, then it's tipped into quite serious anxiety, as we would use it to describe. And I think, you know, what I know is that the brain doesn't calibrate between, if you send off a trigger response to the mind around, like, for example, you've lost your keys and you go into a, you know, where are they? The brain actually doesn't calibrate that to you going, there's a saber-toothed tiger coming at me. It can't tell the difference. So if you're kind of looking at, you know, right, this, where are my keys, you're getting into, that will be triggering off the same fight or flight response that will be innate from when we were out, you know, and having to run from or fight, you know, when we were out hunters and gatherers. So that really blew my mind, because I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. So what does that mean? Which we're obviously going to look at when we come to talk about it, is managing. But it's really worth just noting that, you know, so how I trigger things off, you know, or in my thoughts and in my, because what's probably happening in that moment of the thought is there's catastrophizing going on. That's what then will trigger it off, because the catastrophizing, I'm going to be late, I'm going to miss picking up my child, you know, this is going to happen. Once you go into that then will trigger off the adrenal, which will then obviously go into whole flight or fight.
And yeah, and that's where also, when you said this thing about, you know, things start shutting down in the brain, that's probably why you don't then find the keys, because the ability to then find them is gone. Absolutely. You know, because that's shut down, and then you kind of go, ah, and that's panic station. Now, I don't know if that's kind of anxiety, but that's definitely then panic, and it can be anxiety about what's going to happen if I don't find them.
Well, I think what happens is, we know that if you have a certain amount of healthy stress, but what happens is if you go into that kind of adrenal flow a lot during the day, then you will keep it up here, and that's when it tips into anxiety, and you will just stay then in a state of anxiety.
Yeah.
So when we look at, you know, managing it, that's obviously really important. So that's what happens if you continuously are irritated. If you feel you're irritated a lot in the day, you are starting to go into that adrenal system shutdown. And obviously, you know, this can have massive impacts, like, you know, people who suffer with what's called IBS. You know, what happens is because once you go into the adrenal system, fight or flight, everything gets shut down in the body, because it just wants you to be able to run. So it will discard a whole load of bodily fluids that it doesn't want to be in there, and body stuff. So you need to go to the loo pretty quickly. You know, people say, gosh, I need to go to the toilet. Or, you know, when people, they're in movies or whatever and they get really scared, they often do, you know, poo their pants, because that's what literally the body will do. It'll clear that all out, so that nothing is happening in the body other than either getting you to fight or getting you to fly. It's really effective system. It's fantastic. But it's somehow getting overstimulated for some reason. And of course, what we've been talking about more lately, and I saw Ruby Wax, and she talked about this in Frazzled, and you talk about Brené, is that if we have this state of anxiety and we're in it quite a bit of the time, then it's contagious. That smell is contagious. All you need to do is watch, you know, gazelles. One will run and the others don't actually sit and go, why are they running? They will just run as well. It spreads. And that's why often city living can be more stressful, because of the tightness. And, you know, you talk about the tube as an example of that. And also what's interesting, this was also an eye-opener for me, is that if you look at animals, they actually do have stress, but animals do not have anxiety, and they've done a whole load of research around this. And that's because what they don't do is use, you know, the reptile brain will do the fight or flight, and it will kick in automatically. It will just do it, go, go, go. Then we have the emotional brain that will start to bring in the emotions, but it's the neocortex brain, which is the later developing brain, and they've all just been slapped on each other. They don't all connect well, which we have as humans. That we then, what we try and do is analyze and logicalize it. And that's when it becomes anxiety, because we go, oh, there's this really weird feeling in my stomach. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, gosh, does that mean? Animals don't do that.
Yeah. And what do you think? I mean, you work a lot with, in your coaching business with people with anxiety. And how much do you work with them around the concept of choosing anxiety as a lifestyle? Like Brené Brown talks a lot about, we kind of, it's almost like a habit, and then we choose it because that's what we're used to. What would you say about that with your experience with working with people with anxiety?
Well, that is the hardest moment, is when I work with a client and they realise that actually all this really quite challenging emotional state, they have a responsibility for. That's a very, very challenging moment, because
of course,
to realise that you're causing yourself so much pain, it's hard to believe. But we do know that, it comes from thought, which comes from belief, so we know that it's ourselves that cause a lot of this anxiety. I mean, when we look at session number 2, series episode number 2, when we start to look at how you do prevention work, when I meet my clients, what I'm often doing is getting down, doing a bit of first aid, mental health first aid, so that I can bring them in, help them bring themselves into a more resourceful place, and then start to create things that become habit, because we now know there's so much research out there on what helps you from not going into anxious state. But yeah, I mean, what I've also learned, which is fantastic and genuinely true, and I've used this myself, is thought cannot get you out of an extreme feeling of anxiety. Some people might call it an anxiety attack, panic attack. We'll talk about that next time when we look at language. But if you're in a real high state of anxiety, thought will not get you out of it, precisely because you said
no, your logical mind is gone. It's like...
So what I've learned, which is amazing, is seriously simply breath. And that it not even just the mindfulness breath, which we will come to, but breath. If you actually get your breathing out of shallow breathing and back into deeper breathing, physiologically and neurochemically, it changes. Whether you like it or not, it changes it. And once I accepted that as a truth and did breath, so the way I do it is I do 7-11. So I breathe in for 7 and out for 11. We used to get people to do it in paper bags because it's to do with the carbon dioxide oxygen exchange, and you want that to balance back out again. But we don't do paper bags anymore. We just get people to breathe in but out more, because you want to get the exchange back again. So breathe in for a count of 7 and breathe out for a count of 11, and that is brilliant. So breath and physiology are the quicker ways to actually help you get out of a state of anxiety, which I know we'll look at more in the part 2.
Yeah.
But yes,
I mean, yeah,
the hard one. The choice is the hard one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I connect with that, even though, having gone on a journey many years and managing anxiety much better, and thought processes, whatever else it can be, like blaming other people for things, and then somebody reminds me that, well, it's kind of, you are choosing your thought processes and how you feel about things. It's like, yeah, it still stings, so absolutely, the first time you get presented that possibility, that could it be like this, hard one. But before we wrap up, and we'll wrap up in a couple of minutes, I'm wondering, the question is like, why are we choosing anxiety as a lifestyle? What is it that makes us choose that? Is it because we have become so used to the worry and the stress, and it's just, you know, if you ask people, how are you? And I'm guilty of this. How are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy, busy, busy. And there's this and there's that. And, you know, of course, that's building up to that kind of, you know, state. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's really good question. Yeah. And actually, I was reading a lot about sleep, and Ariana Huffington has written Sleep Revolution, and she and others, and I'm sure we will do something on sleep, part of our illuminations. But she was saying we're in this competitiveness around lack of sleep, you know. And you're right. When I used to work in one job, we always took great delight because we had to write down each hour we worked. And we were all getting like competitive. Well, I did 80 hours. Well, I did 75 hours, and I only had 4 hours sleep. You know, you're right. There's we're giving credibility to it in a way, aren't we? Well, not to being anxious, but to the contributing factors that can lead to that. Yeah, that's a really good point, Tina. Yeah, which I think I have fallen into. And as you know, I come from a work hard, please people, be perfect drive, and from a kind of culture where there's a lot of worrying and catastrophizing for all sorts of understanding why in the background, you know. And so to actually come away from that and just be more in a place of more calm and content and inner peace has taken a lot of work. And I still get that, you know, I still go. And I think we talked about it from a lovely guy I did a retreat with, David James Lees. He explained it beautifully, that if you imagine that the anxiety is like a carousel, and you get on the carousel and then you find difficulty to get off, you're on it, you know, and you know the carousel, like you say, it becomes habit and off you go. And it's because you feel comfortable there. You don't even actually think that there's actually something wrong with that, unless your blood pressure goes up or something else, low-lying illnesses start appearing, and they just no answer. They keep going to the doctors and what's wrong with me. And it's because this is just slowly on high cortisol and high adrenaline, slowly causing problems. And so when I work with my clients, what we do is start to look at what gets you on the carousel, you know. And like I said to you, that my carousel is there, but it's going much, much slower visually. So if I do start to get on it, I can leap off, you know, and actually get myself back. But it is important to know what gets you there, the triggers.
Yeah.
And you're right, there are some gains as well, sadly, which people also go, what is that? How can you have a gain from feeling in an emotional state of anxiety? But there are, and that's what I know, you know, we look at with our clients. What is the gain? Even though it might be a negative gain, you know, it's still there. We get a kind of hook on that, don't we?
Yes. Fi, we've come to the end of time for this episode. I mean, there's lots more to say, as always. I'm thinking about conversation starter for our audience. What about, do you know your triggers? Getting onto that anxiety carousel. Could that be a good question?
Yeah, maybe just start to notice, you know, maybe just notice with curiosity. We always say this, and not judgment, because what you don't want to do is start judging yourself.
No.
What gets you on the carousel. But maybe you're right, just, you know, do you know? And if not, how do you know? How, you know, what is it that you notice that starts to press your buttons so that you start to go, you know? And they do talk a lot about perfectionism, and that's probably my killer. That's probably the one that's done it for me. So people can start to notice, what is it that drives this so that I have to be in this place? Yeah, lovely.
Good. Thank you for this time. And next time, as you said, we'll talk about managing anxiety a little bit more, and that will be the focus of the next illuminations. Take care, Fi.
Thanks, Tina. Bye now.
Bye.